what's going on? I'm Combat Craig, and today we're talking about lawyering up. Should you actually hire a lawyer? When can you hire a lawyer? And should you be thinking about a lawyer? So to help me through this, and this should be a good, fun conversation, Matt Hill is a sponsor of this channel. Check out hillandpotton.com if lawyering up is something that you need to do in the appeals process. He's a friend of mine. He sponsors the channel, and I understand how to fight off a reduction letter. Not all of you guys do, so my approach might be a little different, but if I have to go to the BVA, I feel pretty confident doing that. But if I had to go to the court, I would probably, that would be the place I would lawyer up, and I would probably hire this guy. So in this video, we're going to talk about, strategies. You got to have a strategy. If you have no strategy, that's your strategy. Matt comes at it from a little different angle because this is what he does. He argues cases. My angle is don't go to the board. Don't have to argue. Win your claim up front, and there is no argument. You just win. So we come at it from different angles a little bit, but common goal: get veterans paid. So what's going on, Matt? How you doing?
Oh man, that sounded like one of those legal disclaimers there, Craig. Holy moly, who's the attorney? I was feeling feisty, ready to get in it with you, but you just kind of lulled me to sleep. Where do I sign? I just don't even want to read any more of that. Come on.
Well, I mean, now that you're saying this, I was actually told that I was going to be with Carol, and I got your ass instead. So
well,
I'm not too excited about talking to you either there, good buddy.
All right. Well, yeah, I live in her shadow. What can I say?
All right. So this comes down to a strategy. I teach and preach strategy in my boot camp. Check it out in the description. And if you need medical evidence, you need the nexus. Here's an email address. Hit up my med team. Presumptive service connection claims. I think, generally speaking, my thought about presumptive claims, especially with the PACT Act rolling out and stuff, but just in general, I think that, we're kind of just talking to the average veteran. I think presumptive service connection claims are misleading. I actually think they're basically bullshit. Because it's like, oh, I might have that, or I saw allergic rhinitis in a service record 25 years ago. I should be good to go. It's presumptive now. It's so important to have the diagnosis and the symptoms. I actually think if you can, get a nexus too. That's just my approach. What's your 2 cents on that?
I'll agree with you that sometimes vets put in presumptive claims and they let their guard down, especially when they're dealing with VSOs who might be a little greener, who don't realize that VA is perfectly capable of screwing up a presumptive as they are a direct service connection claim. So what I would want is definitely have service records showing where you were. Okay, we get that out of the way. And then, like you said, we want that current diagnosis, the allergic rhinitis. For a nexus, I wouldn't really care about that as much. If I had a doctor, I'd want the doctor to fill out a disability benefit questionnaire showing the actual problems I have because of that. Okay, because that's where the VA is going to short shrift people with presumptive connections. They'll say, oh yeah, you have allergic rhinitis, you're in the Gulf, great. Here's a 0% rating. Now, that's not what we want, right? So we want to focus on making sure they get the correct rating through their DBQs, their disability benefits questionnaires. And that's, to me, that's typically where I go. If they screw up the nexus, and I see this all the time, the doctor will not read the prompt, which will say, the veteran was in the Gulf, and please confirm he has allergic rhinitis. And what the doctor will come back and do and says, okay, he has allergic rhinitis, but I don't see how this is related to the Gulf because there's nothing in his service jacket saying that he had it in the service. Therefore, it's less likely than not that it's related. That is a completely irrelevant. There's no nexus needed there. All we need is confirmation of the diagnosis from that doctor. So I do see them screw that up some, but to me, I want to focus on the rating because that's what the VA does with presumptive. They're just like, oh yeah, this is related, and then boom, 0 or boom, 10%, and that's not what we're here for. We don't want a plaque on our wall saying I'm service connected for allergic rhinitis. We want money coming in the bank because that's what you're involved. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think I kind of worded that wrong. The nexus is the presumptive part, and you're right. Thanks for cleaning that up. Yeah, the DBQ. You got to get those symptoms right. That's where the rating's going to come from. It's like you're my little maid.
Oh, wow. He's getting some zingers in today, people.
I got a new steam cleaner. I could turn you loose after this if you want. I could use a little work on the carpets. Anyway, probably not. If you didn't know about medical evidence before you filed your last secondary VA claim and it's confusing to you and you've had enough and you just want to lawyer up in the appeals process instead of going at it alone, check out the sponsor of today's video, Hill and Ponton. Links in the description. They might be able to help you with your appeal. Kind of along the same thing, MUCMIIs, medically unexplained chronic multi-symptom illness. Just the fact that there's an acronym called MUCMII and the fact that I actually know how to say that phrase after however long I did it, I think this is another one that people should stay away from because of the, have a diagnosis, don't have a diagnosis, an medically unexplained condition, not necessarily not a diagnosis. I'm sure you have something to say about that. My understanding is it's not diagnosed, but not all the time. But the main one that I want to talk about was chronic fatigue syndrome. I don't think you should go in and focus on chronic fatigue syndrome at 60%, whether you have it or not, because there's this so much as to chance with the MUCMII part. Does that even make sense as a question?
They made this regulation, this presumption, as confusing as possible. I mean, every time I get a Gulf War case, I go back and folks, you should read this. It's 38 CFR 3.317. That's the diagnostic code for this. Okay, excuse me, not diagnostic. That's the VA regulation. And it is just, to me, mind-blowing just how crazy this is, okay? So they consider that a MUCMII, okay? But that has a diagnosis. So it's unexplained. It's an unexplained illness, okay? So there's three really diagnoses you should be looking for. One is the chronic fatigue, then you got fibromyalgia, and then you got IBS or any gastrointestinal disorder, okay? So if you have one of those diagnoses, I say no, you do focus on that. If you're in the Gulf and you have that, boom, it should be service connected, okay? I have cases all the time where the vet thinks he has chronic fatigue syndrome or thinks he has fibromyalgia. He goes to the CMP examiner, and the CMP examiner with fibromyalgia says, oh, you only have 5 out of 6 symptoms. Therefore, you don't have the diagnosis. You don't have fibromyalgia. And then the VA will say, okay, you're in the Gulf, but you don't have this diagnosis. Boom, stamp denied. That is where MUCMII comes in, okay? If you have this problem that's affecting multiple places in your body, there's objective findings of it, but there's no actual diagnosis, well, that's a MUCMII. That should be service connected and then rated, frankly, under the fibromyalgia rating code, because that's how it works. But the VA doesn't get this. I mean, they wrote this freaking thing and they still don't even know how to use it. So I will agree with you. It's not my first. It's not where I want to jump to first, if that makes sense. But if I got a vet and he's got these problems and we can't get a diagnosis, he's in the Gulf, I'm sure going to go down this road.
If that's the way you have to go, there's a very good chance there's a better route. And let me build on that a little bit.
All right.
I actually have a 60% rating for chronic fatigue syndrome at my CNP exam, and then the QTC motorhome. That was a whole fun thing, but just pulled up out in front of a hotel. But whatever, I knew my story and I just stuck to my talking points, which is what I filed my claim for. So they actually did a fibromyalgia test. And I think they came up with this thing when Al Capone was running stuff in the teens. Like, poke, so you don't have enough symptoms. You don't have enough. There's like 17 poke points they do on your body. And it's like,
right.
Well, you got 11 of them, but you need 12. And it's like, wow, This thing's like literally retarded. And the CNP examiner is like, yeah, I don't believe in fibromyalgia, but I do believe in chronic pain or chronic fatigue syndrome and chronic pain. And it turned into this weird conversation. So just that alone is confusing for doctors, because a lot of doctors want to go one way or the other because they probably would like to, put out a diagnosis, and they probably think
Right.
the fibromyalgia actual poke test is bullshit.
Right.
Do they use that like in the real world, by the way? Do you know?
I think they do that for fibromyalgia, the
Yeah.
poke test and all that stuff. But I mean, fortunately, I haven't had to do that myself. But what I've read and other like Social Security disability claims, I've seen that where they do all these different tests and stuff. But it's it's mind-boggling how they made something that should be so simple and direct, and they've just screwed it up to where the raters don't get it, and as you just said, the doctors don't get it either. So it's it's definitely frustrating.
Yeah, so I think the moral of this story and the point that I'm trying to make here is using that previous example. If you have things that you think are MUCMIIs and you're licking your chops and you see a 60% rating for chronic fatigue syndrome, and you're locked in on that, oh yeah, for sure, this is the way I'm going. I would say use Matt's example. Start with the back, hook on the incontinence, hook on the radiculopathy and the depression, and go that route. You're going to get, at the end of the day, it's about getting paid. You're going to get paid sooner, easier to prove that route versus the MUCMII route.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, vets come to me and I'm like, look, I don't care what they call it.
Right.
I don't care what's going on. I care about getting you money. And because what you're entitled to is service-connected compensation. We don't care about service-connected. We want the compensation part. And a lot of times, as you said, with the presumptive, they'll come in and they'll give you a presumptive for hypertension to give you 0%. Well, the hypertension might have caused a stroke that left you in a wheelchair. That's where you should be getting the compensation from. That's a secondary condition. And vets a lot of times are like, oh, I got service-connected, and the VA keeps their money. And I got to tell you, something not much I hate worse than the VA just keeping a vet's money. They should be paying them.
This comes down to a strategy. I teach and preach strategy in my boot camp. Check it out in the description. And if you need medical evidence, you need the nexus. Here's an email address. Hit up my med team. Something else just popped up. And it's kind of going around I don't care what you call it. So I was really focused on combat PTSD. I ended up winning it without a CNP exam because I finally showed up with a diagnosis. But at the end of the day, I don't care if they call it Donald Duck disease. They call it depression, put all 5 of them together. One thing that I don't know, I'm pretty sure it's Carol that talks about it. Her approach is acquired psychiatric disorder or something like that. What's that about, and what are your thoughts there?
Well, the acquired psychiatric disorders is just this broad, encompassing any and every problem that a vet has with a mental health condition. I put mental health condition. She's had a lot of success with putting that in, and then it makes the VA kind of search, well, what is this? What could it be? Or they'll actually just use that term, acquired psychiatric disorder. She's trying to just hand it up on a plate to them, saying, just put this. Clearly the veteran has a mental health condition. Just put this. And so I'll put mental health condition, but that makes them define it, which VA has to do more work. And as you would say, just give it to them and let them pay you. But yeah, that's what you just said with the PTSD is we have a lot of vets come to us say, hey, I have PTSD, and I'll look on their code sheet and they're being rated for anxiety at 30%. And I'll be like, look, they labeled it. Okay. Did they label it wrong? Probably, but we don't care about that. What we care about is getting you up. You have suicidal problems. You don't like people. You can't keep relationships. That's a 70%, if not 100%. Let's let them name it, but let's make sure they pay you.
Yeah. And I talk about mental health stuff all the time. I'm understanding more about my problems and whatever. It's normal for me, but it's been normal for me in my adult life. I was undiagnosed forever. It's so a 70% mental health rating is so common. Once the veteran, you have to get real with yourself and your problems, and then you need to be able to tell them and tell your story and be convincing at the CNP exam. But yeah, a lot of people are underrated, and 70% mental health rating is, if you don't have that, that's the first place I would go pretty much 100% of the time. That's a big moving claim if you're down low or you don't have any mental health rating at all.
I agree.
And at the same time, yeah, I have 5 mental health diagnoses. I need 1. Anxiety is just as deadly as PTSD, combat PTSD, depression. If it's rated, just use whatever you have. Great. Who cares what they call it? Focus on getting up to 70.
Right.
And if you're at 100, that's a higher bar to cross, but then you're at 100. But 70's,
Right.
Right for most veterans. If you didn't know about medical evidence before you filed your last secondary VA claim, and it's confusing to you and you've had enough and you just want to lawyer up in the appeals process instead of going at it alone, check out the sponsor of today's video, Hill and Ponton. Links in the description. They might be able to help you with your appeal. All right, so my next question has to do with Camp Lejeune. So part of the PACT Act, you have to be a human, right? Be at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1987 for over 30 days. It's being handled in a federal court outside of the VA. It's the water contamination lawsuit, if that's the right verbiage. I think, as this is part of the PACT Act, which is gigantic, and I think they're going to screw a lot of this up. What is your sense of what's going on with these kinds of cases, right? They're not claims, cases. And what do you know? Is there movement, thoughts, your 2 cents, please?
Yeah, they're hoping to line up some of the, so as you said, it's outside of the VA. It's an actual court. You do have to have an attorney doing this. It's a totally separate contract than an attorney in a VA system claim, like a service-connected claim. They are lining up these suits. We're talking, I don't even know how many they're going to be, 50, 100,000. There's a bunch of people out there. And, as you said, you actually don't have to be just a service member, you have to be a human. So any person who is on base for more than 30 days is eligible for this. And any survivor of that person is eligible for a claim here. So it's a pretty, there's going to be a lot of people. They're hoping to have some, preliminary lawsuits done this year to see, what the VA or what they're going to pay out, what they're actually, each kind of claim is going to be worth for the different kinds of disabilities. So it'll be, it'll be good. I'm sure, if you're alive, you've seen videos of this, you've seen TV interviews, you've seen commercials everywhere, and you just need to make sure that you're actually hiring an attorney. A lot of these commercials are done by these venture capital firms, and if you sign a contract with them, the contract's still valid. So you need to make sure you actually know who you're hiring, and that's a little scary. We're doing this. We're partnering with a firm that's been Ed Bell, who's been the basically spearhead of this for some 10, probably going on 20 years now. He's been working on this. But yeah, I think it's good that it is outside the VA, because as you said, the PACT Act is massive, and for the VA to get caught up in that, to understand all that, to see what's actually going to be law, going to be regulation, and then the percentages
going to be the norm. Yeah. Just because they passed it, this is the government we're working with. They're not
exactly.
There's no exception. This is going to take years for them to even get this thing in understanding. So obviously it's been going on for a couple of weeks. So temper your expectations. There's probably not going to be any huge major updates for quite a while.
For a while. Yeah, I agree.
All right, cool. As usual, I appreciate your coming on and explaining some of this legal mumbo jumbo stuff. And that offer's still on the table, man. If you want to come over, I got a little cleaning to do.
Well, hey, somebody's got to clean up your stuff for sure. You come out and you say all these things, and my Lord, somebody's got to make sure these vets are getting the right stuff.
Yeah, I got problems. All right, I'll see you later.
All right, man. Take care.
Thank you.